Let me tell you about the exact moment I watched someone completely destroy their credibility in 47 seconds. I was at a networking event in Manhattan. High-level entrepreneurs, CEOs, people who don't waste time. A guy walks up to a group discussion about leaving corporate careers. Someone casually asks him, "So what made you leave Goldman Sachs?" Simple question, right? Here's what he said. "Well, it's complicated. The culture wasn't really aligned with my values anymore, and I felt like I was working 80-hour weeks without really making an impact that mattered to me personally, and my wife was getting frustrated with never seeing me. Plus, I read this book about purpose-driven work, and it made me realize that climbing the corporate ladder isn't everything. And honestly, the stress was affecting my health. My doctor said my cortisol levels were through the roof, and I just felt like life is too short to be miserable, So I finally decided to take the leap, even though everyone thought I was crazy." 47 seconds of verbal diarrhea, and I watched something fascinating happen. The CEO he was talking to, a woman who sold her company for $200 million. Her face went from interested to polite to completely checked out. Within 1 minute, she'd lost all respect for him, not because his reasons were bad, but because he explained himself like he needed her permission. Now contrast that with another guy at the same event. Same question. "Why'd you leave your corporate job?" His answer, "It wasn't the right fit anymore." 6 words. Pause. The same CEO leaned in and said, "Tell me more about what you're building now." Same information, opposite reaction. Here's what nobody tells you. Every time you over-explain yourself, you're subconsciously communicating that your choices need external validation to be legitimate. And the next 16 minutes, I'm going to show you the neuroscience of why over-explaining triggers a loss of respect in other people's brains. The 4 situations where you're unknowingly doing this right now. The exact verbal framework high-status people use instead that actually increases respect. But here's the critical part. This isn't about being rude. It's not about being mysterious for the sake of it. This is about understanding the psychological mechanics of respect and how you're accidentally dismantling it every time you talk. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Respect isn't earned through transparency. It's earned through boundaries. And if you don't learn how to set verbal boundaries, you'll spend your entire life wondering why people don't take you seriously. Let's fix that. Part 1. The psychology of over-explaining. The explanation. Reflex. First, let's talk about why you do this. You're not weak. You're not insecure. You're experiencing something called the explanation reflex, and it's hardwired into your nervous system. Here's what's happening. When someone asks you why about a decision you made, your brain interprets this as a potential social threat. Not consciously, but deep in your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for threat detection. An alarm goes off. They're questioning me. I might lose social standing. I need to defend myself. So you start explaining. The neuroscience. Studies from UCLA's Social Cognitive Neuroscience Lab show that when people feel socially evaluated, their dorsal anterior cingulate cortex lights up. This is the same brain region that processes physical pain. Your brain literally experiences a challenge to your choices as a form of social pain. So you try to alleviate that pain by justifying yourself. But here's the problem. The more you explain, the more you're signaling, "I'm not confident in this decision. I need you to agree with it before I can feel okay about it." And the person listening, even if they're not consciously aware of it, picks up on that signal. Their brain registers. This person needs validation. That means they're unsure. Unsure equals low status. The status detection system. Here's something most people don't realize. Human brains are constantly running status assessments in social interactions. Not because we're shallow, but because for thousands of years, understanding social hierarchy was a survival skill. And one of the fastest ways our brains assess status, verbal confidence. When you over-explain, you're unconsciously demonstrating you don't trust your own judgment. You need consensus to feel valid. You're seeking permission to exist as you are. High-status people don't do this, not because they're arrogant, but because they've learned that brevity communicates certainty. Real example. Imagine 2 scenarios. Person A, over-explainer. "Why did you turn down that job offer?" "Well, it's complicated. The salary was actually pretty good, like really competitive, but the commute was going to be brutal, probably 90 minutes each way. And I've been reading about work-life balance lately, and I just felt like, even though the money was tempting, I didn't want to sacrifice my mental health. Plus, the company culture seemed kind of corporate and rigid, which doesn't really align with my values. And I've been trying to prioritize happiness over money. You know? Person B, bounded response. Why did you turn down that job offer? The fit wasn't right. Pause. What are you looking for instead? See the difference? Person A is asking for approval. Person B is stating reality. And here's the critical insight. Person B's brevity doesn't mean they're hiding something. It means they don't need to convince you they made the right choice. That self-assurance, that's what creates respect. Part 2. The 4 situations where you're bleeding for the bata. Let me show you the 4 most common situations where you're unknowingly destroying your credibility. Situation 1. Lifestyle choices. This is the big one. Someone asks, why don't you drink? Why are you vegan? Why don't you have kids? Why did you move to that city? And you feel this pressure to justify your entire worldview. What you say, oh, well, I don't drink because I read this book about how alcohol affects sleep quality, and I've been trying to optimize my health. Plus, my grandfather had issues with alcohol. Not that I think I would, but I just wanted to be careful. And honestly, I feel so much better when I don't drink. Like my energy is higher, and I'm more productive. And what you're communicating, I need you to approve of my lifestyle before I can feel okay about it. What high-status people say instead, I just don't. Or, it's not for me. Or, I prefer not to. That's it. No defense. No justification. Just a simple statement of preference. And if someone pushes, it's just how I live. The psychology. When you refuse to over-explain, you're communicating. My choices are not up for debate. I don't need your agreement. That boundary, that's where respect lives. Situation 2. Career decisions. This one destroys people all the time. Someone asks about a career move. Why did you leave that company? Why are you switching industries? Why haven't you gotten promoted yet? What you do, you launch into a 3-minute explanation about office politics, your manager's incompetence, the company's poor culture, your long-term vision, the market conditions. What you're doing, you're defending yourself against an accusation that was never made. Nobody asked you to prove your decision was correct. They just asked a question. What high-status people do. It was time for a change. Or, the opportunity wasn't there. Or, I wanted to try something different. One sentence. Full stop. Real example. I watched a friend interview for a VP position. The interviewer asked, I see you left your last role after only 8 months. What happened? Low status response. Well, when I joined, they told me I'd be leading strategy, but it turned out to be more execution-focused, and the team wasn't really collaborative. Plus, the CEO kept changing direction, and I realized it wasn't the growth opportunity they'd sold me on. High status response. The role evolved differently than expected. I'm looking for something more strategic. Same information, but the second version owns the decision without apologizing for it. First person didn't get the job. Second person did. Situation 3. Personal boundaries. This is where people lose the most respect without realizing it. Someone asks you to do something you don't want to do. Can you work this weekend? Can you lend me money? Can you help me move? What you do. Oh man, I really wish I could, but I already have plans with my family this weekend, and we've been trying to spend more time together because we've all been so busy. Plus, I promised my wife I'd finally fix that thing in the garage, and honestly, I'm pretty exhausted from last week. What you're communicating, I feel guilty for saying no, so let me give you enough reasons to justify my boundary. What high-status people do, I can't this weekend, or that doesn't work for me, or simply, no. The psychology. When you over-explain a boundary, you're signaling that your no is negotiable. You're inviting the other person to challenge your reasons, find loopholes, pressure you further. But when you state a boundary without explanation, you're communicating. This is non-negotiable. I'm not asking permission to have boundaries. That clarity, that's what earns respect. Situation 4. Personal setbacks. This one's subtle but deadly. Someone asks about something that didn't go well. How'd that project turn out? What happened with that relationship? Did you hit your goal? What you do, you launch into damage control mode. Well, The project didn't go exactly as planned, but it was a learning experience. And honestly, the timeline was unrealistic from the start. Plus, we had some team issues, and I think if we'd had more resources, we could have pulled it off, but you know how these things go. What you're doing, preemptive defense against judgment that hasn't even happened. What high-status people do, it didn't work out. Or, we didn't hit the goal. Or, it ended. Full stop. The power move. High-status people don't defend failures. They acknowledge them without shame because they understand. Failure doesn't need an explanation. It needs acceptance. And when you can state a setback without spiraling into justification, you communicate. I'm secure enough to own this without making excuses. That self-assurance, that's magnetic. Part 3. What to do. Instead, the high-status communication framework. Okay, so if over-explaining kills respect, what do you do instead? Here's the exact framework high-status people use. Rule 1. The one-sentence answer. When someone asks why about any decision, your default should be one clear sentence. Then stop. Examples. Q. Why did you quit your job? A. It wasn't the right fit anymore. Q. Why don't you drink? A. I just don't. Q. Why are you single? A. Haven't met the right person yet. That's it. No elaboration, no defense, no justification. The psychology. That pause after your one-sentence answer, that's where respect is built. Because in that silence, you're communicating. I don't need to convince you. This is simply my reality. Pro tip. If they want more information, they'll ask a follow-up question, and then you can elaborate, because now it's a genuine conversation, not a defense. Rule 2. Comfortable silence. This is the hardest part for most people. After you give your one-sentence answer, you'll feel uncomfortable. Your brain will scream, say more, fill the silence. They think you're rude. Resist. That discomfort, that's your explanation reflex trying to protect you from perceived social threat. But here's the truth. The silence isn't awkward. Your fear of the silence is. High-status people are comfortable with silence because they're not performing for approval. Exercise. Next time someone asks you why about something. 1. Give your one-sentence answer. 2. Close your mouth. 3. Count to 5 in your head. 4. Let them fill the silence. You'll be shocked how often they just move on. And when they do, you've just increased their respect for you without saying another word. Rule 3. Redirect. Don't defend. If someone keeps pushing after your brief answer, don't get defensive. Redirect. Example. Them. But why don't you drink? There must be a reason. Low-status response. Well, like I said, it's about health and high-status response. It's just not my thing. What about you? Are you enjoying the wine? See what happened? You acknowledged the question without answering it, then redirected the conversation. This communicates. I heard you, but I'm not debating this. Let's talk about something else. Respectful, firm, final. Rule 4. Mystery is magnetic. Here's something counterintuitive. The less you explain, the more interesting you become. Think about the most compelling people you know. They're not the ones who tell you their entire life story in 5 minutes. They're the ones who reveal themselves gradually. Example. Someone asks, "Why did you move to Austin?" Over-explainer. Well, I was living in New York for 8 years, and the cost of living was getting ridiculous. Plus, I wanted to be closer to nature. And Austin has this great startup scene, and the weather is better and mysterious. Needed a change. Which person are you more curious about? The one who gave you their entire backstory, or the one who left you wanting to know more? The principle. Scarcity creates value. When you're selective about what you share, people lean in. When you overshare, people check out. Rule 5. Own it without apology. This is the ultimate power move. When you make a choice, any choice, own it completely. Don't apologize. Don't hedge. Don't qualify. Examples. I know this might sound weird, but I'm vegan. I'm vegan. I probably should have handled that better, but I handled it the best I could. I don't know if this is the right decision, but this is my decision. The psychology. When you own your choices without apology, you communicate. I trust my judgment. I don't need your permission. And that's self-trust. That's what respect is built on. Part 4. The transformation. What changes when you stop over-explaining? Let me tell you what happens when you implement this. Within 1 week, you'll notice people treat you differently in conversations. They lean in more. They ask better questions. They stop trying to fix your decisions. Why? Because you're no longer inviting them to validate you. Within 1 month, you'll feel a shift in your own self-perception. You'll realize, I don't actually need anyone's approval. That internal validation, that's freedom. Within 3 months, people will start describing you differently. Confident, self-assured, grounded. Not because you changed who you are, but because you stopped performing for approval. The final insight. Here's what I want you to understand. Respect isn't earned by explaining yourself. Respect is earned by trusting yourself enough not to. Every time you over-explain, you're saying, I don't trust my judgment. Please tell me I made the right choice. Every time you give a brief, confident answer, you're saying, I trust myself. Your opinion is welcome but not required. That's the difference. Conclusion. So here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, practice the one-sentence answer. Every time someone asks you why about anything, 1 sentence. Then stop. Don't defend. Don't justify. Don't fill the silence. Just state your reality and let it stand. You'll be uncomfortable at first. That's normal. But I promise you, by day 7, you'll feel more respected than you have in years. Not because you changed who you are, but because you stopped apologizing for it. Remember, people respect boundaries, not explanations. Now go practice,